Members, good afternoon. We've got a quorum. So the special meeting of the FC will begin. There are 3 sections. It will run till 6:20, and the purpose is to scrutinize the government's budget estimates to ensure that the fund requested would not be beyond the dedicated amount. And all questions must be related to the expenditures and estimates. So please, if you have any DFPL 001, make reference to that. The number in bracket is important because today we have 2 DVPB sessions, and planning and lands is this current upcoming session. So don't ask questions related to the following session. So you can also submit additional questions in writing and submit to the Secretariat before 7 p.m. today. The follow-up questions is to follow up on the government's written response. So may I invite Secretary for Development, Bernadette Lin, and her team to come in and to speak. In the next session, we will deal with another development-related topic, and this session will deal with the issue of planning and lands. So members who want to speak, please press the button. Secretary Ling, please take us through your introduction. Thank you. In the 2026-27, the total is estimated expenditure of the Planning and Lands Branch and the departments under its purview is approximately $77.61 billion, comparable to the revised estimate actually for the previous year. So the number of civil service posts has decreased by 307 compared with last year. The Planning and Lands Branch will continue to make good use of resources and take forward the priority tasks under the principle of enhancing quantity, speed, efficiency, and quality. So let me go through with you our key tasks ahead. The first is to accelerate the development of the Northern Metropolis. And we will fully advance the development of the NP, which will remain our top priority in relation to our work in the coming year. Of the 9 new development areas in the NM, 4 of them are actually having site formation and infrastructure works in full swing. Subject to funding approval of the Legislative Council, we will commence this year the works for the University Town in May, Phase 1, Stage 2 of the Santin Technopole, and the Government Joint User Complex in Kutong North. We will also, in this financial year, activate Lao Shan, the rezoning for the statutory plan there. At the same time, we will expedite the dedicated legislation to accelerate the development of the NM with a view to further removing barriers and easing restrictions for the NM development. We aim that by the middle of this year, we can introduce the bill to LegCo following public consultation and finish the legislative process within this year. The NM Projects Supervision Office has been established so as to expedite the approval of large-scale private projects in the NM. The wholly government-owned Hong Shui Kiu Industry Park Company Limited was established early this year, and this enables the government to take a leading role, better integrate market forces, and adopt private-public partnership in developing and operating the around 23-hectare sites of the Hong Shui Kiu Industry Park, so as to drive the development of diverse industries, including high value-added or smart production and advanced construction. We will complete the remaining preparatory work in the second quarter, including seeking approval from LegCo to inject capital of $10 billion into the company so that it can commence operation in the middle of this year. Also in Hong Shui Kiu, what is underway there is our first pilot area under large-scale land disposal. The tender will close in July. After that, we will complete the tender evaluation as soon as possible. We'll continue to use other innovative land administrative measures, such as pay for what you build, or to allow landowners to voluntarily surrender land planned to be assumed by the government to offset the amount payable for land premium, and also to extend our tendencies to increase the incentives of private developers. While pursuing development, we will not forget urban-rural integration. By the middle of this year, we will brief the panel on development, the idea of urban-rural integration, including the details of the proposed 200 million NM Urban-Rural Integration Fund as a pilot scheme. We will explain our thinking behind the fund. We'll brief the panel on development, and if it's approved by LegCo, we will establish the fund this year. Besides Northern Metropolis, our key task is to stable land supply to support diversified development. In respect of the overall land supply, in the current fiscal year, there are 9 residential sites on our land sale list. Together with supply from other sources, the potential land supply for the whole year is expected to have a capacity for providing around 22,000 units. In view of the vacancy rate and the supply and demand situation in the non-residential property market, in the new fiscal year, the government will continue not to put up general commercial sites for sale. We do want to make use of the commercial sites on hand. Following the launch of the Children's Hostel in Town scheme, response has been positive, and we have invited the market for 3 commercial sites to express their opinion and to develop the sites into hostels for senior post-secondary students. And we've received positive response. We are consolidating and analyzing the views collected. At the earliest, by this fiscal year, we can launch 1 site or more for the purpose of developing it into post-secondary student hostel. And also, we will launch a tender for the comprehensive yacht development project for the Aberdeen Typhoon Shelter Expansion Area under large-scale land disposal in the first half of next year. And there will also be a rezoning of the site, hopefully by the first half of next year, that the tender can be received and invited. Another key task of us is to enhance building maintenance. The Development Bureau, together with the Urban Renewal Authority, will strive to, by the second half of this year, launch an enhanced version of Smart Tender. It will include establishing a more rigorous pre-qualified list of consultants and contractors, and the ULA will conduct the tendering and tender evaluation processes for owners to engage consultants and contractors. Under the budget, we will inject a total of $300 million to the ULA for that purpose, of which $100 million will be an activation fund to let the ULA to set up a subsidiary company to carry out the enhanced version. Another $200 million will be for the owners to provide concessions for the owners. Later on, we will brief the development panel on the details and the proposals on the enhanced version of Smart Tender. We will also allocate an additional $1 billion to the lift modernization subsidy scheme to handle the remaining applications for some 1,200 lifts. We are also reviewing the practical experience gained from Operation Building Bright 2.0 and have earmarked $3 billion in that regard. We will consult LegCo and seek funding for launching the new scheme after completing the review early next year, so that there will be a new subsidy scheme for building maintenance. By the end of this year, we'll introduce a bill to LegCo to amend the Buildings Ordinance, including proposals for making further legislative amendments in light of the fire incident at Wong Fuk Court. For example, including upgrading large-scale maintenance works to Class 1 minor works for enhanced regulatory oversight and strengthening temporary precautionary measures and fire safety measures for large-scale maintenance works. In terms of enhancing the harbourfront, the event and public space at the former Hong Kong Railway Freight Yacht Pier has been opened by the end of last month, And now we are carrying out a study to see how we can better connect the East Kowloon waterfront. And in the second quarter, on the new prior in Kennedy Town, we'll conduct consultation in the second quarter of this year. Chairman, I've just given you the introduction, and I and my team are open to questions from you and your members. Thank you. So far, we've got 13 members waiting to ask questions. I'll read out their order now. They are Wu Yingpeng, Yiling Chik, Andrew Lam Yu Ming, Christine Fong, Chen Hofeng, Kwok Fu Yung, Carmen Khan, Tang Ka Piu, Albert Chuang, Augustine Vincent Chang, and Priscilla Leung. So each member will have 4 minutes, including question and answer. The first one is Wu Yingpeng. Thank you, Secretary, for your introduction. My question is, follow up on my reply, DVP PL 133, including the Urban Rural Integration Fund. The pilot scheme for the fund can help, I think, revitalize the precious assets in the rural areas in NM and also create grassroots job opportunities so that can have a good positive impact on people's livelihood. My question for the Secretary is, for the pilot scheme itself, how can this pilot scheme align with the conservation policy? And also, I'm concerned that for the subsidy for rural hardware, how can you avoid that from overlapping with other government projects to support rural development, to avoid wastage of public money? Chairman, as well, we will inject a capital of $200 million for the integration fund. By the middle of this year, we will brief the panel on development on the details because things are still being planned. But one important thing is this fund is not to be used by the government. We are giving this fund to non-governmental organizations for their use or rural people, for example, those from the rural committees or educational bodies. If they have good ideas, proposals that can facilitate rural urban integration in NM. Give you one example. For example, some village committees, they think that there are special characteristics in their village and they want to beautify the village houses there. That's their own initiative. Then they can apply to the fund for support. Of course, we have a vetting process, but for some other projects which are government projects, government-led, for example, our proposals for bridge and road maintenance in the light of the large-scale NM development, we do want to improve on the sewerage works, and those would be classified as government projects, and we will ensure that there will not be any overlapping between the two types of projects. Any supplement? Thank you. Next one, Elaine Chick. Okay, 2 questions. DEVPL 026 and 025. But follow up on those 2 questions. For 026, as for rural trail, the integration trail, I want to compliment that for the integration trail, the number of complaints and accidents are all in single digits, so very low. So that reflects that the concept of integration is very satisfactory and is accepted widely by the public. In the future, well, there will be integration trails along the waterfront, and that will be useful too. And your reply says that the Eastern Coast Park being built in North Point, there will be also an integration or inclusion trail as well, including cyclic trail. And phase 2, it will be connected to the Eastern Boardwalk in the future. So I'd like to know the inclusion trail, would it have seamless connectivity with the East Coast Boardwalk? Would it be extended in length? And people are also concerned about the progress of phase 2 of the Eastern Coast Boardwalk. And my other question is the short-term tendency for the waterfront area. The government's reply gave us details on the fact that besides large sites which will be leased to contractors, even small plots of land like kiosks or selfie sports are available. Even for the refreshment kiosk, the rents are quite low, as low as $1,000. So the event space along the waterfront, how can people compete or bid for the space there? And how do you decide on the rental levels? So these are very low rents. Would you, for example, reserve some sites, charging such low rents for younger operators? And also, in terms of monitoring of the space, you tend to monitor whether they meet the target in terms of the days of activities or days of operation being run. So you are not really providing much details on whether you've monitored enough about the activities themselves. So can you provide us with any figures about the number of visitors at the event spaces and also the rate of operators which have continued to rent the space continuously, so as to let us decide whether these trial sites are successful, and so we can see whether we should expand their scope in the future.
You've already spent over 2 minutes on your questions. Just a couple of more questions. I see that in Wan Chai there are entrepreneurship opportunities for young people. I want to know if there are any online and offline opportunities for young people. For example, can young people pay their rent in installments? Secretary, the first question about the boardwalk as well as the shared paths, I will ask Permanent Secretary to reply. The second and third questions are interrelated. We're talking about a long section of the harbour front. We lease out the harbour front areas to different operators. For example, we have the Central Harbour Front event space. We also have another event space in Wan Chai Harbour Front. The venues we're talking about are quite large, so the tenants will have to bid the venue at a high price. However, if we are just using part of the harbour front for a small refreshment stalls or a restaurant, then of course the rent will be lower. When we make assessment on the rental, we look at the type of the venue or how the area is used. In terms of KPIs for venues that are of larger scale, we are keeping the relevant statistics, that is, how many events are held a year. However, for part of the harbour front in Wan Chai, there is a dedicated part for young people to sell snacks and light refreshment. And for this kind of small venues, we are not setting KPIs because we do not want to scare away the young people. We want to wait for a longer time and make some observation. Yes, Ms. Doris Ho. The member asked whether the East Coast Boardwalk will be linked up with the phase 2 of the East Coast Park Precinct, and the answer is yes, because we want to enhance visitors' experience. Next, Mr. Augustine Wong. I'd like to ask about the EVBPL 122, 126, and 127. The government has done a lot to support minor owners under compulsory sale. According to the reply, affected owners, there were 28 of them, and the government reached out to 17. Do you know why the rest of them did not seek help from the Support Services Center? The other question is about Operation Building Bright 2.0. According to statistics, there are more buildings under the scheme in Yaoqing-mong, Shamshui-po, and Kowloon City, but there is a small number in Kwun Tong. What are the reasons behind? Also, how does the buildings department define Category 2 buildings? What kind of criteria does the department follow? Also, the number of applications approved is rather on the low side. Is it because the standard land price or land premium is not close to the market level? Secretary, I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to respond to the first question about compulsory sale, and the other question I will defer to Director of Buildings. The third question is about standard land premium. I understand that the relevant sectors would like the Lands Department to come up with standards. According to our past experience, oftentimes after we've come up with a standard, many land title owners would still like to negotiate with us on a case-by-case basis. This is because each case has its own characteristics. So as we set the land premium, we are not spending too much time on setting a standard. Instead, we want to speed up the development of agricultural land in the northern metropolis, and the development model for these agricultural lands are similar to each other within the northern metropolis. Also, we apply the standard land premium on the redevelopment of industrial buildings. Industrial buildings are usually in old districts, and again, they are similar in nature, so that way it's easier for us to set the standard premium. We will come up with a standard land premium where appropriate. Ms. Doris Ho? On the first question, our direction for the support center for minor owners under compulsory sale is that the center has to reach out to all the affected minor owners. If the affected minor owners are of a small number, then that means some minor owners did not seek help. Director of Buildings? On the point about Operation Building Bright 2.0, as we know, there are two categories of buildings. For Category 1, owners, corporations, members can coordinate among themselves to follow the instructions under the Operation Building Bright scheme. And so the Buildings Department does not have to intervene. And for Category 2 buildings, owners themselves cannot make coordination to abide by the mandatory inspection notices. For example, 3 new buildings. Oftentimes, owners of these buildings have difficulties to abide by the inspection notices, then we would select them to include them under the Operation Building Bright 2.0 scheme. A lot of times, these Category 2 buildings are 3 new buildings. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. First, the EVB PL161. It's my own question about basic housing unit. I want to ask about the inspection of subdivided units after the launch of the basic housing unit regime. According to statistics, there have been regular inspections and controls. Do you launch inspections after you receive reports, or do you have a targeted number of buildings that you need to inspect? Also, according to the reply, after the launch of the basic housing unit regime, it is expected that there wouldn't need to be so many patrols, but you will continue to patrol and inspect industrial buildings, and that's a good news. For industrial buildings, are you launching targeted patrols and inspections? And before you launch these patrols, would you coordinate with other departments such as the housing department or the housing authority? This is because tenants who are affected will have to be relocated. My other question is about the EVB PL012 and 013. There are questions from Ms. Maggie Chen and Mr. Duncan Chu. There are some new land policies. For example, large-scale land disposal approach as well as tripartite collaboration. These are all good schemes and approaches. These measures will help reduce the time for the government to resume land directly and also reduce the initial costs for land development for the government. Have you made an estimate of how much money you'll be able to save with these new measures? Secretary, on the first question about inspections of subdivided units, I'll ask the Buildings Department to reply. I will try to respond to the second question. That's about illegal use of industrial buildings. If people are living inside industrial buildings, that's against the law because it's dangerous, and we would definitely take actions. We conduct patrols and inspections, and the buildings department would talk to the housing department when there is a need to launch these inspections and patrols, because we might have to rehouse or reprovision the affected tenants or owners. However, it doesn't mean that these tenants or owners would be given priority to be allocated a public housing unit. We would only offer help to those who are really in need. Later this year, we will amend the buildings ordinance. The amendment is to step up our prosecution capacity in relation to illegal use of industrial buildings. Currently, we issue a notice to the owner who are using industrial buildings unlawfully, but in future, once we get the evidence, we will make prosecution. We wouldn't allow time for the tenants or owners concerned to move away. As for resumption of land on the Northern Metropolis, in terms of how much money we're able to save, it really depends on how many private owners are willing to surrender their land. Director of Buildings, there are two parts to our inspections. First, reports. So we can't control the number of reports we receive. So it really depends on the number of reports we receive every year. Second part, we adopt a risk-based approach. Depending on the reports or intelligence we receive, well, earlier we have talked to the Census and Statistics Department, and they have provided us with data and statistics telling us how many buildings have more subdivided units. And we target these buildings to launch our large-scale inspections and operations. In relation to inspections of industrial buildings, we adopt a similar approach. We collect evidence and intelligence. There might be cases referred to us from different departments, and we would go door to door to see if there are any illegal use of industrial buildings. Next, Mr. Yu Ming. DEVBPL 144, 146, and 147. According to 144, the administration talked about the Urban Rural Integration Fund. According to the reply, the fund could be used to repair bridges as well as roads, and there will also be signage erected. As far as I understand, the fund is overlapping with, for example, the conservation, countryside conservation scheme, as well as the minor works funding scheme under the HAD. I want to know how you can avoid any overlapping of these schemes and funding. Also, Northern Metropolis covers Yuen Long as well as the North District. I want to know if there will be an even distribution of the fund to the entire Northern Metropolis. In relation to 146, about 2,000 operators are affected because of the development of the Northern Metropolis, but only 260 people are getting the ex gratia allowance. Many brownfield or business operators affected would like to carry on with their businesses. So I want to know what is going on with the rest of the 1,700 cases. How come they're not getting the ex gratia allowance? In relation to 147, we know that in the new development areas there are many livestock farmers. Because of developments, they have to relocate to other places. We know that the government is developing a 3-story high building for livestock farming. I know that the relevant site formation works have been completed. So when will the multi-story building be put into operation? If the old sites were demolished and the new building is not ready yet, how much would that affect the livestock farmers and relevant operators? Secretary, perhaps I will respond to the question about the Urban-Rural Integration Fund first. The other questions have to do with the affected operators in the Northern Metropolis project.
For the integration fund, as mentioned by a member, when it's launched, if it involves enhancement of hardware to ensure that it will not overlap with what the government is doing, definitely coordination is needed. I personally feel that for some large-scale infrastructural works, for example, enhancement of works, that should be government works. And we hope that the Urban Rural Integration Fund can be based more on folk wisdom and let the community do what they can do. Give you another example here. Say in some villages, there are initiatives to set up a heritage trail. Should the road need to be improved on, then that can be done by the government. But the heritage trail itself, involving the collection of information, the telling of stories about the past, then I hope that this fund can inspire the relevant organizations to apply for support, and then they can do the work themselves. So we hope that for infrastructure, that can be left to the government. The fund itself, at most, will only works on or supports small-scale infrastructural projects initiated by the public. $200 million is only the initial capital. We hope that once the fund is in operation, I'm sure it will be popular. And then if it's well used, then in due course, we can add to the injection of capital. Secretary, Permanent Secretary, 2 questions on the Northern Metropolis and the operators, for example, brownfield site operators, which are affected by the NM development. We do care a lot that, after the land is resumed, then the compensation should be offered to the ex-owners soon. But there is the process involved. We need to verify the ownership, and therefore, for some simple cases, say if the ownership rights are very distinct, then once the land is resumed, within 6 months, the government can release the compensation. The Lands Department staff actually are working harder, and we are maximizing our labor force, and we will outsource some of our work to try to accommodate more cases. And for other brownfield site operators, they want to get the compensation earlier, they can make an application to the Lands Department. Mr. Yu was asking about the farms, these farmlands, and the site formation would be ready soon, and the Agricultural Conservation and Fisheries Department would need to wait and see who would win the bid for the land. And if we were to build the infrastructure projects there, it would take about 3 to 4 years. And we do hope that the farms affected can have seamless transition. If not, then our infrastructure projects are such that we can let the farms remain on the sites as long as they can. Let me remind members again, 4 minutes. Often you ask questions for more than 2 minutes. So basically, the officials have only about 2 minutes left to answer. So please, members, don't ask 3, 4, or several questions in your time, and please give the administration time to answer. Next one is Christine Fong. Thank you. My question is 072 and 126. That is Lau Yip Kang and Wang Hobing's questions. My follow-up is that I'm concerned about the Operation Building Bright. Just now, Secretary said that you're going to apply for funding of 3 billion from LegCo. In the past, you had a subsidy for elderly people who want to repair their flats or people in need who want to repair their flats. Subsidy of $50,000 for internal restoration and $80,000 for external repair. There's also another subsidy in my district that we apply on behalf of residents, that is to the Fire Services Department involving maintenance of fire alarms and so forth. So there are all kinds of subsidy. Is it that all of them will be dealt with under Operation Building Bright 2.0, and will they be consolidated? For example, the subsidy for the Fire Services Department, in the past, you would help pay for maintenance or, for example, the disabled to install fire alarms in their flat or in their rooms. But since the Wanford Court tragedy, Secretary said that you would bring in IoT fire system. Would that be included under the Operation Building Bright 2.0 project? And also, for buildings with a history of more than 50 years, there's one case in Sai Kung, and there's a case of a 30-year-old building in Sai Kung. Sometimes the owners and corporation may not totally accept residents' views. Many elderly people, of course, they want to apply for your support. So what's your positioning? How would you activate or promote your schemes? Secretary, Ms. Fong, well, as you suggested, we are now helping owners with flat maintenance or internal repair and maintenance inside their own flats. There are all types of support. For smart tender, it's mainly applicable to large-scale maintenance. There are individual projects that are also covered by smart tender. But our initiative with the Urban Renewal Authority, that will cover this, the enhanced version, we would focus on large-scale maintenance to have this, to make use of this enhanced version of smart tender. For an elderly person who wants to get maintenance small scale in their own flat, we would not make it mandatory for them to go for smart tender because that would be unsuitable. And just now you mentioned about how do we decide on which buildings to be covered. Firstly, of course, the owners have to apply for the support first. And just now, Director of Housing said that in some situations, for large-scale maintenance for a building, that would be handled by the buildings department. So the department will need to look at not just the condition of the building, but also whether there are 3 new buildings. Do the residents there have the ability to manage the whole project? If it's a 3 new building in need of maintenance, well, I think there are not that many such buildings. So that is under smart tender. So you would maintain the subsidy of $50,000 for elderly households. Is that right? Or people in need for large-scale maintenance. 50,000 is about Operation Building Bright 2.0. What's available for each elderly household occupant as their own contribution to the large-scale maintenance of the building itself. And we're going to review the enhanced version, which will be completed early next year. The direction of our review is to see that this scheme has been running for many years, but we want to be better focused to help elderly people living in 3 new buildings in particular. We will not rule out reviewing the amount of subsidy as well, because the amount is linked to our flat valuation. Okay, Chen Hock-Fong. I have 2 questions. The first is 008. Now the waterfront in some areas, is offering refreshments, wining and dining services. But can you open up the entire waterfront area so that wining and dining can be offered? Have you considered that? Actually, our waterfront now is so long. If only parts of it offer wining and dining, then that may not be convenient to the public. And each section of our waterfront is unique. How can you retain people there, tourists or residents, to stay there? You need to provide wining and dining services. Have you considered opening up the entire waterfront so that there can be catering services all the way, so as to enhance the experience of tourists? Another question is 022. For Smart Tender, all along we felt that, well, the enhanced version of Smart Tender, of course, could help people, but we also wanted to, Secretary, you know that I've been advocating that it's been done by URA or Buildings Department so as to provide real help to small owners, because small owners are not in a position they don't have the professional knowledge to choose the right contractors, so they have to rely on the URA or the government for help. I know in the past you talk about the lack of manpower. Buildings Department has limited staff as well, but URA is going to have the support of an independent body, and also for the upcoming financial support. Have you considered providing support for this and her enhanced version so that you can change the percentage of support, that is after the maintenance support is offered, then the contractors may pocket the additional support from the government without resolving the maintenance issues? Secretary, as for whether we will open up our entire waterfront to provide catering services there all the way through, honestly, we have not thought about that. We don't have that intention. Why? Because each section of the waterfront differs. For some areas, like in Kennedy Town, at its back, there are various restaurants in operation along the Kennedy waterfront already. In the Kai Tak development area, in that area, there are lots of restaurants in operation. So we don't want to add to the competition there along the waterfront. But if for some sections the waterfront where people may have a difficult access or hard access to drinks and food, and we can consider that. And also in relation to Smart Tender, our long outstance has been that we would not easily carry out large maintenance for buildings, because otherwise we'll send out the message that to owners that it's up to the government to do, then they will not look after their own properties properly. So now we try to be more precise. Only for 3 new buildings or buildings populated by elderly people, then the buildings department will carry out the maintenance on their behalf and charge them back. But in our enhanced version of Smart Tender, the URA will carry out the work of assessing a tender. For buildings receiving support for maintenance, the URA would also give the owners choice of contractors. So the URA will select a list of contractors for the owners. So the URA will be more heavily involved. We hope that can provide great help to the owners. Now, with more services provided by URA, Smart Tender is a fee charging scheme. So of course the fees then as a result would have to go up. But nowadays, despite the fees, the service is highly subsidized. Therefore, the budget has reserved an amount of capital injection to support the enhanced version. We're only charging 5 to 50% of the fee now. So it'll be in future, even if the fees go up, it will be affordable to the owners. And ultimately, we hope that the enhanced version of Smart Tender will provide for healthy maintenance and to get rid of, unscrupulous charging by these dishonest contractors. Okay. Please don't ask 3, 4 questions in one go. The most 2 questions. Please be strict to the point and just go straight to your question. Otherwise, there's no time left.
想問兩個問題。
Ms. Kwok Foo-young, I have 2 questions, 068 and 069. 068 is a subsidy scheme for owners in need. There are about 38,000 applications, but only 21,000 was approved, so the success rate is about 50% only. Are there statistics showing why these applicants fail to have their applications removed because of their failure to pass the income and asset test? If there are a lot of owners who fail because of this reason, would you consider adjusting the income or asset limit? Also, according to the reply, it takes the relevant department 155 days, that's about 5 months' time, to approve the applications. How will you shorten the application process? About 069 is about Smart Tender. The Secretary talked about Smart Tender just now. My question is, in 2017, $300 million were approved and about $150 million have been used up. What is with the remaining balance? And the newly approved funding, will they be used together with the rest of the $150 million? According to the administration, the money will be used to set up a subsidiary company by the URA. What will that subsidiary company do? Secretary, I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to respond to the first question. Second question about Smart Tender. There is a commitment under Smart Tender. As the member said, there is a remaining balance. Since we're going to roll out an enhanced version of Smart Tender, the fees will be increased. So we are going to set aside $200 million for the enhanced version of Smart Tender to support owners in need. There is a remaining $100 million, and they are for the URA. That's because under the URA, there isn't enough manpower that could deal with such a large-scale scheme. In the past, they only conducted data analysis. They were not responsible for inviting tender or evaluating tenders. They didn't have to formulate the pre-qualified lists either. In future, the URA will have to form a team with many professionals, and so in future the money will be set aside for the URA to implement the enhanced version of Smart Tender. Ms. Doris Ho, we don't have the relevant statistics at hand. That is, how many owners fail to have their applications approved because they could not pass the income test and asset test. Well, we will check the information afterwards. As for the approval for applications, it takes around 155 days because this scheme is to help elderly owners in need, and therefore there is an asset test that we have to conduct. And you might ask why we need to do the asset and limit tests. This is because this building maintenance grant scheme is to offer subsidies to elderly owners to carry out maintenance works within their apartments. So we think that to make use of public money prudently, we think there is a need to carry out these asset limit tests. Ms. Carmen Khan, I'd like to follow up on 052 and 053. After the typo fire, we have the independent hearings underway, and the entire society is concerned about the hearings, we all hope that the report to be published by the independent committee could recommend the future role of the URA as well as the future directions for Operation Building Bright 2.0. The government said it is setting aside $3 billion for the Operation Building Bright scheme as well as the Smart Tender scheme. Currently, the URA is suffering a loss of $2.7 billion. Is that why the government is asking the URA to establish a subsidiary company to be in charge of the $100 million of funding? And how will the original Smart Tender scheme be transitioned to the enhanced version of the Smart Tender scheme? Should we wait until the report from the independent committee is ready? Also, the government said we will only have a review of the Operation Building Bright scheme in 2027. So is it too early again to step up the version of Smart Tender scheme? Also, the URA is not within the audit scope of the Audit Commission. I believe this kind of audit is not the same as value for money audits, however. So I'd like to hear from the government about its views. Secretary, these are all questions about the government's principles. There are many systems that might require the government's review, and that's because of the Wanfo Court fire. I remember that the Development Bureau as well as other policy bureaus under the leadership of the Chief Secretary for Administration told LegCo about our views in this regard this January. If we think that there is a need to change the system, and that there is a better direction we can take, we don't necessarily have to wait until the report from the independent committee is ready. In January, we announced that there will be an enhanced version of the Smart Tender scheme, and we noticed that in general the community supports this direction, so we are finalizing the relevant details now. By the time we implement the details, we believe that it will be the second half of this year because the URA will need time to take forward the preparatory work. The independent committee will complete its investigation this September. I believe by then there will still be time for us to further review our systems and policies, so we won't stop at the moment just because of this. Chairman, there are still $150 million under the Smart Tender scheme. Will the government make good use of the remaining balance instead of injecting another $100 million into the subsidiary company to be set up by the URA? Secretary, I have to explain. The remaining balance is for items that have already been established. There is a commitment to subsidize owners to take part in the Smart Tender scheme, so owners are paying a lower fee to join the scheme. This remaining balance is for owners to take part in the Smart Tender scheme. At the same time, the URA needs to establish a team to operate the enhanced version of the Smart Tender scheme, and the funding for the URA as well as the funding that is for subsidizing owners to take part in the Smart Tender scheme are two different funding. It is mentioned in the budget that there is going to be $200 million of provision, and that is to be injected into the Smart Tender scheme on top of the $150 million we have now. Owners are worried whether they still will get the subsidy after the Smart Tender scheme is enhanced, so we're injecting the money into the scheme. Next, Mr. Bill Tang. My question has to do with building maintenance. 170, 117, as well as 119. I understand that PCE that is involved in the maintenance works of the Wanfo Court project, they are undertaking the maintenance works of other buildings as well. They have over 40 projects in total. As far as I understand, Onke Court in Outer Kok are also under the responsibility of the same contractor as that of One for Court. According to the reply, you're going to launch a re-tender exercise for Onke Court. I understand this. What if the maintenance works have already been completed by 30%, or the relevant tendering exercise has already been completed for 30%? Well, you need professionals to redraft the tender documents. I'm not only talking about Onke Court, I'm talking about over 40 buildings that have outsourced their projects to the same contractor. Also, turning to the Smart Tender Scheme, the enhanced version will be rolled out in the second half of this year. Some owners' corporations have already engaged an engineering consultant to draft their tender documents, but they have suspended the tendering exercise because they are worried that the engineering consultant they have engaged is not on the pre-qualified list in the future. So will there be a transitional period for owners' corporations to see if the contractors who have submitted a bid have their background checks conducted by the relevant parties, for example, the URA? Secretary. The first question has to do with contracts. You mentioned that some consultants have already entered into contracts with owners, and how should they proceed with the procedure? Well, perhaps this is not the right occasion for me to tell people how to deal with their contracts. The second question has to do with the transitional arrangement. Currently, the Smart Tender Scheme is still in place. In reality, I understand that some owners decide not to take part in the existing Smart Tender Scheme. They'd rather wait for the enhanced version of the scheme. So owners definitely have the right to opt for the enhanced version. For owners that are currently under the Smart Tender Scheme and they have already kick-started the tendering process and they want to suspend the process and wait for the enhanced version of the scheme, well, we are in talks with the URA now to see how we should come up with a transitional arrangement. Currently, we are dealing with the situation on a case-by-case basis. We're adopting a lenient approach, and we try not to urge owners to finish their tendering exercise if they decide to put a hold onto the exercise. Chairman, my question is, the URA is going to take up a lot of work. Should we wait for the third reading of the bill to be passed before the $300 million can be allocated to the Smart Tender Scheme? Secretary, well, the funding approval will have to be endorsed by the Finance Committee of LegCo. We plan to, in around May and June, report to LegCo the implementation details of the enhanced version of the Smart Tender Scheme, and we will implement the scheme in the second half of this year. Well, the budget has already been completed, so that would not affect our work. Mr. Albert Chuang, I'd like to follow up on 125 and 172. The administration mentioned the Hongshui-Q Industrial Park Company will be established, and some of the sites will be allocated to the industry park, and through shareholding or equity shareholding, the industry park company would share some of the costs with private enterprises and developers. Can you tell us how the equity shareholding and arrangement will work? Also, the government said it will rationalize its policies on dealing with unauthorized building structures. For unauthorized building works that are of minor scale or of lower risk, they may be able to get the exemption. So what kind of UBWs could be incorporated in the minor works scope? There are many unauthorized building works in Hong Kong, so if you are to check every of them, it will require a lot of manpower and effort. Secretary, we're going to amend the buildings ordinance, and we will only table the bill in the second half of this year. Part of the amendment is to rationalize policies concerning unauthorized building works. For minor unauthorized building works that have been in existence for many years, instead of having the administration deal with them, we'd rather spare our effort on major UBWs. So for the minor ones, we'll ask owners to engage professionals to check whether they are safe. If they are safe, they can keep them. So what do we mean by minor UBWs? When we amend the legislation, we'll come up with a list. To give you an example, there might be hanging racks outside residential units. There might also be racks that hold air conditioners, and these might be considered as unauthorized building works. In future, we will make it clear what should be defined as minor UBWs. And for these UBWs, members of the public can just engage professionals to check them.
On Mr. John's first question, the Hong Shui Kiu company has land as its resources because the government has approved 23 hectares of land free of premium for them. And so the Hong Shui Kiu company, if it expects any company to set up offices there, then the industry park company can work together with the targeted company, which can also bring its talents, technology across to Hong Kong. So when they join in setting up a company, then should the company generate profits in the future, then the government has an honor because it has offered the land to the company, then the government can reap the profits as well. So in terms of shares, how do you decide on that? That's a good question. What kind of company we want to set up branches in Hong Shui Kiu? I think that and it will have to be a company that brings actual economic benefits to Hong Kong and also creates a certain number of jobs and contribute to our GDP. So we'll consider all those factors. Vincent Cheng. My question is PR 20 and 19. The first one is about the waterfront. As mentioned in the question, there is a dedicated funding for waterfront for 12 projects, most of which have gone on well. For example, the park in the East Coast Boardwalk and so forth. In the Kowloon waterfront, as mentioned by the Secretary, they will develop the waterfront there. So will there be any dedicated fund? For example, there is 14 kms have been opened so far out of the 21 kilometers. So could you allocate some funding for development of the waterfront and also to create more share paths? And secondly, or share space, and also talking about building maintenance, I'm concerned about the progress of renovation. In the past 5 years, there have only been one park in Mong Kok that have been renovated. So there are a few other projects listed for renovation that have made no progress. The government has kept saying that there are sites with urgent need for renovation or redevelopment, and there's also concern about plot ratio. But would you speed up the process of urban renewal? Chairman, about waterfront, besides completing the work on connectivity in Kowloon, particularly in the coming months, and also the lawn in several areas behind the waterfront. They are being used, developed as open space. I think after the meeting, we can give you the information for members for your reference on the preparation plans for open space. And as for the redevelopment work, in the coming 6 months, we have to iron out and we'll launch some policy measures, including the plot ratio, transfer of plot ratio. At the Development Bureau earlier, we briefed members on that already. And also, URA's plan for flat option, and also the 7 years of ownership as a criterion for compensation. That kind of threshold may not be sustainable, so we need to review our current measures. Later this year, we'll finish our review, and by then, I think we will also brief the Development Bureau on our decisions. Priscilla Leung next. Chairman, my question is on DVPL 100. In it, I express my gratitude to the Secretary for giving me a detailed reply on the Northern Metropolis development. And also, it talk about the development by phases, incentives and so forth for potential developers and so forth. And you said in late January that as for the amount of private land, you cannot provide any information then. I don't know to what extent can you not provide information. I want to tell the Secretary, I want to know about your long-term plan for phase 1, phase 2. You said there are 9 new development areas, and you give them the locations. I've got friends who actually did seriously consider going to the Northern Metropolis to open a kindergarten or international school. They told me, frankly, however, later that they decided to withdraw. Why? Because they saw the planning, but they found that the planning is to be of various phases are to be completed at different times. But if they want to carry a project like in Dongguan, they want to see 3 years later all the other support measures like infrastructure and other, say, with school, there has to be hospital, shops, places for people to consume, to attract talents. And they found that you have your planning outline, but it seems to them that they felt uncomfortable with the fact that they have no idea, what will actually be offered some years from now. You have the land, but some information seems to be lacking, and you are doing it phase by phase. If you want to attract investors, you cannot attract them with your phase by phase approach. Secretary? As for international school, that's just my example. I mean, everyone who wants to set up offices in the area, they may have the same expectation. Or any enterprise that want to set up shop in the Northern Metropolis, they would like to know the plan for the entire area. Now, we can say that we have entered the construction stage, so there is sites allocated for private, public housing, for industries, community facilities, and so forth. But for some other areas in the site, they are still under planning. Construction work has not begun yet, so we can only say that we'll go through the planning stage and to confirm the outline, the planning outline. So I can give you an overall plan, but often I received similar views as well. Sometimes enterprises, they very much want to, for example, build a school there, and they want to know near the school, when will there be people moving in? When will there be residents? I can tell them an answer more easily because the government has planned on which site is zoned for residential development. So we know when people should move in. But if the site is surrounded by industrial areas, then that we are still attracting. So I cannot at this stage give you an exact reply. But we are trying our best now to tell the potential investors what we know and to help them make a decision. Next one is Dennis Leung. Follow up on my question 192. Question 192, and it's related to 064 180. It's mainly about the use of vacant schools. The paper said that there are 269 vacant school premises, of which 219 for government development. You subsidized non-government organizations up to $1.5 billion to provide community services and so forth. So in the future, would the government take more initiative to make use of vacant schools to promote community development? Like now in Hong Kong, there are not enough hostels for post-secondary students. Or if you want to attract mainland enterprises to set up shop in Hong Kong, they may not have the space to build their plants. So would the government make good use of the vacant schools so as to help Hong Kong achieve more and tell a good Hong Kong story? Secretary, answer is yes. Our system is such that when there are vacant schools available and they are controlled by government, then under our current mechanism, we would first of all ask all policy bureaus now that this vacant available from when, then the bureau could see based on their needs. For example, there could be a bureau which wants to use a vacant school to provide or build training facilities or to create a welfare facility. So these relevant policy bureau will have to raise their hand, indicate to the government. But if there are any vacant sites not wanted by any policy bureaus, then we would put it on the land list under the lands department to make it available for the NGOs to invite them to apply to use those sites. But the most important is that the policy bureaus need to raise their hand first. They need to make the request first. Next one is Lee Kuan Yew. My question is PL 059095. In the government's reply, it said that the Northern Metropolis Supervision Office will step up their coordination and set down the deadline for approval, making approvals and so forth. But for innovation technology projects are different from residential projects. Say if you're talking about labs or data center or advanced manufacturing factories, they require unique structures and environmental requirements. For example, high voltage electricity, dust-proof or sewage treatment facilities. So the vetting process is actually more time-consuming and more complicated than residential units. So my question is, the Northern Metropolis Supervision Office, besides the existing mechanism, how can they shorten the vetting time for innovation and technology projects? And also, the Bureau will also set some, for example, disclosure mechanism to enhance the transparency of the vetting process of the supervision office. And if there are any other alternatives for us all to keep track of the efficiency of approving projects in Northern Metropolis. I'll ask Permanent Secretary to answer. Thank you, member, for your question. You are concerned about innovation technology, for example, in Starlink, the data park. The Innovation Technology Bureau already has set up a dedicated team under the Food Supervision Office and with staff from Buildings Department in that group as well, because the Buildings Department needs to approve their layout plan. So therefore, the Innovation Technology Bureau has already activated their work, and the Starling Data Park is also on the radar of the Supervision Office. So if there's any need that this project, any help the project needs, then they will provide for what they need. And as for whether the Supervision Office would on the efficiency of vetting applications be open and make disclosure to the public. I think that's a good suggestion. We will look into that. I think the Supervision Office has 3 dedicated departments involving Buildings Department, Lands Department, which have their own KPIs. So now we are collecting figures. So we see how to find an appropriate channel so that on a regular basis, maybe on an annual basis, to brief or to make known to the public the progress of our work. Next one is Hong Kam Yin.
I'd like to ask about 049 and 156. These 2 questions are interrelated. According to government statistics, in the end of 2025, private buildings aged 30 years or above, there are 5,200 of them that have not been able to comply with the mandatory inspection notices. The Operation Building Bright scheme will be reviewed only in 2027. There are questions of whether the mandatory building inspection scheme would be relaxed, because otherwise building owners would be subject to a lot of pressure. Also, if will there be a higher subsidy amount under the current building maintenance scheme? Now I'd like to follow up on 007, a question from Mr. Cheng Hock Fong. In Kwun Tong, there is a quarry site in Lei Yue Mun, and it's also very popular. I think the government should consider developing the site. Secretary, for the second question, we take note of members' suggestion. As for the question about mandatory inspection scheme, we've heard from members recently about whether we should review the threshold of the mandatory inspection scheme. Currently, under the scheme, as long as a private building reaches the age of 30, then the director of buildings could make use of his power to issue a mandatory inspection notice. However, only for buildings about 30 years old will get such notices. And if you look at the statistics, about 70% of the private buildings that get the inspection notices, they have already reached the age of 50. So it's not that the director will issue a notice as soon as a building reaches the age of 30. And it is clear that we will review the Operation Building Bright scheme. The government is of the view that it is necessary for us to continue to provide financial subsidies to owners to help them carry out maintenance works. And the subsidy will only be offered to owners with financial difficulties. And we will abide by this principle. Currently, only buildings of a certain rateable value could be incorporated under the scheme. So we will review whether the threshold should continue to be applied and whether we are targeting the right building owners. Also, after owners that have joined the scheme have carried out the maintenance scheme, we might have to consider offering support to them so that they could continue to maintain their buildings. Otherwise, their buildings will have to be repaired or maintained soon. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on 021. This is a question from Mr. Vincent Chang, and this is also a question about Operation Building Bright 2.0. I think this is a concern of a lot of people, and I'm happy to see that the government is earmarking $3 billion to this scheme. I have a question. In the past, there were some housing estates in Tuen Mun, and owners tried to apply for the Operation Building Bright scheme, but they only submitted the application after the deadline because of some reasons. Now that the government is rolling out the 2.0 version of the scheme, I want to know if the scheme will cover the owners who failed to meet the deadline when they submitted the application. That is because the independent checking unit released their findings rather late, and I'm referring to Siu Hong Court in Tuen Mun, and that's phase 3 and phase 4 of the court. So when you roll out 2.0 of the scheme, will you allow these owners to resubmit their applications? Also, according to the administration's reply, it looks like the government will focus more on 3 new buildings under the 2.0 scheme. The original Operation Building Bright scheme covers all kinds of old buildings, not necessarily 3 new buildings. So I want to know your thoughts when you roll out the new round of the scheme. Secretary, we are still reviewing the 2.0 scheme, and so it's hard for me to tell you at the moment what will the threshold be for the scheme in the future. We are going to roll out a new round of the scheme, and for those who failed to meet the application deadline previously, well, theoretically speaking, after the new round of the scheme is rolled out, these owners could tender their applications again. The reason why we want to review the scheme is that we want to make use of public funds effectively. Next, Dr. Hui Simon Lee. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on DEVB PL 164. In Part 4 of the reply, the administration said starting from the end of 2025 to this February, a total of 400 buildings have been inspected, and it was found that 16 of them failed to meet the fire services compliance requirement. And also, the government is not keeping statistics of the number of inspections they've conducted as well as the non-compliance cases. Well, for contractors to abide by the requirements, they have to uphold their professionalism and professional conduct. And regulation is part of the work of Buildings Department. I want to know if the administration will maintain the relevant statistics and set KPIs in this regard so as to make the work of the department more efficient and more transparent. This is all to step up their inspection effort. My other question is 180. According to the administration falls short of replying how many vacant government sites and premises will be used for short-term purposes. In Part 1 of the reply, it is mentioned that 3,355 government sites have been rented out, and there are also another 424 vacant government sites. So is this the total number of vacant government sites available for short-term uses? If this is correct, then it is expected that 60 government sites will be rented out in 2026, and that only accounts for about 1/7 of the total number of vacant government sites available. So does the government have plans to better make use of the underutilized government sites and at the same time reduce costs for maintaining these government sites? Secretary, I'd like to defer the first question to Director of Buildings and the second question to Director of Lands. Director of Buildings, we have already stepped up inspections against these sites, especially their fire services installations and equipment. We will definitely maintain the relevant statistics, and we will set KPIs on our inspections in this regard. Director of Lands, I would like to clarify the figures. Just now, the member mentioned there are 3,550 government sites, and they are currently leased out under short-term tenancies. The member wondered whether there will be more short-term tenancy government sites that could be rented out. We believe that in the coming year there will be 60 of these sites. With regards to the 424 vacant government sites, as mentioned, there are a number of vacant government sites, and they are reserved for NGOs. For example, they might be vacant school premises. These premises are listed out on GeoInfo Map website, and if you're interested, you're welcome to visit our website for the relevant information and submit applications accordingly. So my understanding is correct. That is about the total number of vacant government sites available. Yes, the 3 figures I mentioned are correct. Thank you very much. If there are no further questions from members, we will wrap up this session here. The next session will begin at 3:50 p.m.